How's everyone doing? Um, this is going to be a little bit different than my usual YouTube videos. Today we're going to be talking about Modern Horizons. We're going to be talking. We're not going to play any Modern today. And the reason behind that is because I don't have access to the cards. The set just came out. Like the drafts just went live recently, and there's like a bunch of cards I want to try. A bunch. And I'm very excited to get into the cards that I am very interested in, some cards that potentially see play, and some cards that I think are busts. Um, I think overall, I'm pretty excited about Modern Horizons. A, because there doesn't seem to be anything that's absurdly broken. There's no like Hogak that's just broken. There's no Ren and 6 that's like too format warping, right? Because like Ren and 6 and like Lava Dart and Plague Engineer are very, very, very format warping. Like stuff like Affinity, Elves, en-Vec, like those decks literally died because of those cards. Um, so it seems like Modern Horizons gives a lot of tools to like tier 2 and tier 3 decks. And gave some tools to tier 1 decks, right? They gave like the green mana exile, the graveyard kind of card with flash the evoke creature, the white evoke creature. We'll get into that because they're all falling into our colors. Monkey and Delve Dragon to me are the closest to Hogak. Exactly. Like the monkey seems very close, but again, it's just like another 1 mana red aggressive creature. It's very, very good. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to like warp the format to where it's oppressing other decks, right? And like the Delve Dragon is a card that, like, you know, if it fits into is a prowess again, then it's not like that deck is already top tier. So whatever decks that deck already pushed out, it's already pushed out, right? But yeah, let's start getting into it. I believe, let me look at my little notes here. So I organized a couple cards that stand out. I think I have 17 cards I'm going to go over today. And it's organized by, first off, removal spells. There's a ton that Abzan has access to. And as a BGX deck, we're going to play a combination of discard spells, removal, threats, etc. So the first few cards are going to be removal spells, because there was a ton that got printed in the set. The second are cards that just slot in naturally. Cards that, you know, are just good stuff. It's BGX is a good stuff dot deck, so it's jamming all those into one category here. And then the last category are cyborg cards, hate cards that since we are a reactive deck by nature, this category is going to go over the certain hate cards that may or may not see play in our deck. And again, this is for Abzan midrange. This is from a Abzan midrange perspective. There are certain cards that may spawn new archetypes, and I think that it's going to be difficult to evaluate from that perspective because there's no real reference to which, like how the deck's going to look, because it's going to be a new archetype. For example, Grief. I know Grief has been a very hyped up card and very well deserving so, because the ceiling of the card is very high in combination with Ephemerate. Does that combination work in BGX? I would argue probably not. I think that kind of changes the landscape of the deck. It might work in Orzhov with all the ETB effects, but again, we'll delve into it when we get to that card. I don't want to just get stuck on the title slide. So yeah, let's just get the ball rolling. The first card we're going to talk about today is Vindicate. So Vindicate is 1 white black sorcery, destroy target permanent. Clean, simple. It's a reprint from, gosh, I don't remember. Let me open it up here. I believe it's from not Odyssey. It's I'm obviously not well prepared anymore. But it's unfortunate because I was thinking about getting it a foil version for my EDH deck, and Apocalypse is from Apocalypse, and unfortunately now that it is in Modern and everyone's gonna want their copy of Vindicate, that it's gonna be spiking up crazily. But anyway, this is a nice catch-all answer here. It's just destroy target permanent, plain and simple. It can destroy a land. It can destroy anything. And I think that's really, really, really powerful. Is the fact that you can kill bounce lands, you can kill Tron lands in the main, right? So this is pre-board. You know, like there's decks like Rock and Orzhov that play Field of Ruin main, and you do have to have some deck building costs. And I know someone in Discord asked, like, well, now that we have Vindicate, do we still need Field of Ruin? And I would argue yes, because Field of Ruin's kind of essentially not free, but it's nice to have in a 2-color deck where, you know, you can just blow up a key land. And this is kind of the same feature where you can really blow up a land, and it's not like you need it's like a dead card later, like, you know, like Pillage and Ponza, where Pillage is kind of a great card on turn 2 off of Mana Dork, but in the later of the game, unless your opponent's on running some pretty nice artifacts, like, you know, a sword or a Batter Skull or something, Pillage is kind of mediocre late game. Vindicate is not. Vindicate does not have that problem. Vindicate is good early, it's good mid, and it's good late. And that's what's so great about this card. I think this card fills a lot of holes in Abzan and Orzhov. The fact that you could blow up a land, that means you just have a game against Tron game 1. And I think that's huge. And I'm going to kind of bring this up thoroughly where, like, people evaluate cards, right? And what does this card do for you, right? And it's one of those things where does this card improve your deck's power level? And B, does this card improve your deck's bad matchups? I think those are really 2 key things. And something like Expressive Iteration, right? That card doesn't necessarily improve the bad matchups for Is It Phoenix or Is It Prowess, but it increases the power level of the deck so high. Vindicate, I think, does both, where it increases the power level of Abzan. Vindicate is a very powerful effect. So now, like, think about it this way: when an opponent slams a Teferi or a Jace, it's trophy or bust, right? Vindicate destroys everything. So it can you can, you know, destroy an early Teferi, you can destroy a Jace, you can destroy a big Teferi, you can destroy a Colonnade. Like, trophy is kind of gonna go by the wayside now that Vindicate is here. And I got Gabriel's in the chat, and Gabriel mentioned Vindicate turn to Ignoble, sign me in. That is exactly where I think Abzan's gonna go. Abzan already had a history of running Mana Dorks, right? It's running Ignoble Hierarch. It's kind of within the Abzan circle, we call it Hierarchzan. And this is one of those things where we can do something kind of dumb now. Like, you know, like Abzan's kind of like that fair deck where, you know, you go discard Tarmogoyf, Liliana, and it's like, it was good 4 or 5 years ago, but now you kind of need to do something stupid, you know? So Vindicate helps you do that in the sense that you can go turn 1, you know, Noble, opponent goes turn 1 land, you go turn 2 Vindicate, blow up their land. So you go from, you have 3 permanents to your opponent's 0. Exactly how Ponza is operating. They go land. You go turn 4, insert any 3-drop. You can go discard spell. You can go, you know, Grist. You can go lingering. Like, you just have more permanents than your opponent, and catching them on the back foot is just so powerful. The ceiling of this card is so high, and it opens up Abzan so much. And I think I'm saying Abzan specifically because you need that turn 1 dork. It obviously boosts up Orzhov's power level as well. Just having a versatile removal spell. But going casting this on turn 2 is going to be so powerful. So I'm really excited about Vindicate. So I spent like 8 minutes on one card. Hopefully I need to speed this up. So the next card is Dam. And Dam is going to be interesting because it's 2 black. So black, sorry. It's 2 CMC. Black, sorcery, destroy card creature. A creature destroyed this way can't be regenerated, and it has overload. So with an overload cost of 2 white, you can cast this for this overload cost, and you can just pretty much wrath the board essentially. So this is literally a wrath in one card where it's a spot removal spell. And this is nice as probably potentially like a one of, where you can main deck a wrath, you know? So it's going to be very, very powerful. Again, probably as one of. It's probably like replacing like the Blood Chief's Thirst cost slot where you want something that could tax something and you want to tax something bigger with it if you have more mana. And I like this card because you can tag a creature early, and then if you're behind on board, like for example against like blue-red prowess, right? There's um there's those games where they flood the board and you just can't win. If their most dangerous opener is honestly like turn one Swift Sphere, turn two Soulscar Mage plus another Swift Sphere. That's honestly the most scariest straw, where they just have like one more creature than your removal spell, because then you just die. Dam is like a main deckable Wrath, and that's just so powerful. Where like, you know, most more often than not, your Wraths are in the sideboard. My Engineered Explosives are on the sideboard. Damnation, you know, like those cards are in the sideboard. The fact that you can main deck this and not lose much equity is still just a 2 mana, you know, sorcery removal spell is so strong. I actually have to write this down because in my I have a draft of what I want to build my Abzan deck to be, and I actually kind of forgot about this card. So I'm gonna remember to mention this and maybe add it to my supposed draft list for my next stream. So let me just write this down. I think we are going to be injecting our probably too much good removal. Yeah, and that's the thing, and you're gonna have to adapt to it, right? Like, do you think your job push for a day? I think it depends on the build, and I will get to that, Gabriel. I will get to kind of fitting everything in the deck. And the quick and short answer is Yorion. Yorion is my quick and dirty answer here. On to the next card. We're going to talk about Prismatic Ending. And I think Prismatic Ending is subtly pretty decent. And I'm going to compare this to like Abrupt Decay. Okay, so again, this card's probably going to be in 3-color decks. Sadly, I don't know if it'll be good in Orzhov. But I think in like Selesnya mid-range, this has a home because there's no Abrupt Decay in those colors. But if you want to compare it to something like Abrupt Decay, if you want to exile anything that's 1 mana, it's better than Abrupt Decay in terms of rate. So I'm going to, you know, bypass the sorcery speed on this, but I should probably take a step back and just say what the card does. So it's X white sorcery has Converge. Exile target non-land partner with its mana value is less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast a spell. So what this means is if you cast this for just white, you can exile something that's 1 mana. If you go, you know, green white or black white, you can exile something that costs 2. And if you go BGW, so 3 mana, you can exile something that costs 3. So again, if you compare it to something like Abrupt Decay, it'll kill anything that costs 1 efficiently, more efficient than Abrupt Decay. If you exile something that costs 2, you break even, but it's a sorcery spell, so that's the downside. And then if it's something that costs 3, like a Teferi or, you know, a Liliana or whatever, then you're better off playing Abrupt Decay. And I want to say that Abrupt Decay is uncounterable. So I want to compare the fact that now that Counterspell is legal, I think Abrupt Decay has more stock now. I think Abrupt Decay becomes a lot more valuable. That being said, I think Prismatic Ending is a nice card to consider for, you know, Selesnya mid-range, or just, you know, just kind of like a one of where if you want to have, if there's like a lot of like 1 mana, like, okay, let's take it this way. As long as Modern gets more lower and lower to the ground, and there's a lot more 1-drops that are played, like Ragavan, the monkey, you know, there's Prowess where you have Swiss Sphere and Soulscar Mage, and you can't spend 2 mana on it. You need to kill it on turn 1. This is where Prismatic Ending comes in clutch. So I don't want people to forget about this card. I think this card is very, very good. And I think as the format gets lower and lower to the ground, as things get more efficient, as it starts essentially becoming more like Legacy, I think this is when Prismatic Ending becomes better and better, even though it's a sorcery. I can see room for 1 or 2. Maybe not now, but I can see a world where it becomes a solid removal spell in Abzan. And that's why I wanted to talk about this card. And I also want to throw out the cute version of the fact that it can kill Thalia for 2 mana, while Abrupt Decay will cost 3. And the trick is you just, you know, pay the Thalia tax, and just make sure the extra 1 to pay for Thalia is either green or black or one of the extra color. So Reed said this is a source of plowshares in modern. Yeah, because if modern keeps going lower and lower to the ground, I can see it. Um, it's just so efficient. And just imagine like an Abrupt Decay that can answer an Amulet, an Expedition map, a Sakura Tribe Scout, all the the red one drops, Goblin Guy. It's like there's just these, a Llanowar Elf, like stuff that were like Abrupt Decay is too slow. That's why like that window is open for this card. And it's not like it's that bad against the 2-drops either. You break even. It's just really of how many 3-drops are in the format. Does a sorcery speed matter, and does an encounter ability matter? So again, I think this card is just a nice card to have in our back pocket. Next card is Sudden Edict, and I want to briefly talk about this card because there have been Edict effects in the past. We had like Liliana's Triumph, I believe, where it's a 1 black, target player sacrifices a creature, and I think if you own a Liliana card not own, but if you have a Liliana in play, your opponent discards a card. So this card is probably the best version of all of them, just because of the split second. Granted, I think Liliana's Triumph doesn't target. Let me double check before I go down say all these wrong information. So I'm gonna pull up Liliana's. So Liliana's Triumph is each opponent sacrifices a creature. So the key thing is this card doesn't work versus Leyline, right? Versus Liliana Triumph does. So that kind of key text matters. But that being said, like if there's a meta where there's a lot of like Through the Breach, a lot of decks that just have like a singular creature, and now that counter spell is legal, Force of Negation is legal. Something with split second always has to be considered. And again, it's one of those things where I'm gonna keep mentioning it's nice to have in our back pocket, because BGX is one of those decks where you want to have access to everything, right? You want to consider all your options and adapt your specific removal spells to the meta. And this is the perfect example of something where if you want to adapt to the meta, there's a Through the Breach deck that plays Through the Breach was Remand. Sudden Edict is doable. I'm not saying this is going to be a slam dunk or anything, but again, it's just going to be nice to have in our back pocket. And eventually, if the meta goes into, a place where they, end step Through the Breach, hold up Force Negation, then Sudden Edict is very, very good, right? So I throw that out there. So this is all the rule spells that I talked about so far. Oh, actually, I think there's actually one more. I forgot. Look at my list. The Solitude. I almost forgot. So Solitude is a 5 white creature elemental with flash, lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, you can exile up to one other target creature. That creature's controller gains life equal to its power, and then you exile a white card from your hand. So this card's pretty sweet because like if there's 2 Death Shadows on the board, you can exile one of them, and then the other Death Shadow dies. And potentially if there's a Scourge, you could kill the Scourge potentially, and then kill all the Shadow. So like this has a very huge blow up potential against Shadow. The thing about it though is, compared to Grief, I think this card is going to be difficult to kind of abuse because the fact that you're doing this for a removal spell that on a creature on board, it's going to be difficult to fit in Abzan specifically just because it's not white based. So I imagine this card, in other decks like Taxes, maybe in Orzhov if you lean more on the white splash, but I feel like if you're going to pick between Solitude and Grief, I think you're going to lean towards black, and which is why I think this card probably won't see too much play and probably won't in BGX. But I do want to mention this is pretty funny against Scourge and Shadow. And if that deck ends up being really, really popular, then it gives you a reason to lean harder into the white splash. And do note that this doesn't get stubbed. So having a removal spell that doesn't get stubbed is huge. So this is, again, nice to have in our toolbox to have against the meta. It has flash, which is really, really cool. So I think the real bottleneck is just having more white cards to be able to efficiently to consistently cast this card. I if you have a deck that probably has Grief and Solitude, I think it's gonna be difficult because more often than not you're gonna be exiling cards in your hand. So if you have like Tidehulter Sculler, you know, these like black white spells that you can pitch both, you know, potentially Luris, you're gonna have too many cards pitching, right? You're not gonna have enough cards in your hand to actually play the game, you know. So I think again this card has potential in a more like, you know, mono white taxes kind of build, or like a white splash build where, you know, you don't want to play path, and you want something that's just quote free. But in BJX specifically, I think you'd have to pretty much warp your deck around it because most of the BJX builds are black based, right? So that's kind of, since we're talking about BGX specifically, that's why I don't think this will see too much play in BGX. But I'm not saying it's, but probably we'll see play in Modern for sure. So now we're going to talk about cards that are going to be integral to our game plan, cards that we're just going to play. And this is honestly the card that I'm most excited about. So Kaldra Compleat is 7 mana, living weapon, indestructible. It's an artifact equipment. A creature gets +5/+5, has first strike, trample, indestructible, haste, and whenever this creature deals damage, combat damage to a creature, exile that creature, with a equip cost of 7. And there's been a lot of hype around this card and a lot of shame on this card. And I think people are expecting too much from this card. And the reason why they say that is because this is 100% reliant on Stoneforge Mystic. And they are right. If they kill your Stoneforge Mystic, this card is just absolutely dead in your hand. And I want that to be completely established. Because that, once you kind of acknowledge that fact, that this is completely reliant on Stoneforge Mystic, your expectations on this card become more realistic. And then you kind of realize this card is really good. I think this card is 100% sideboard material. A lot of people are expecting this to like replace Battle Skull. I think that's wrong. A lot of, you know, this is again 100% sideboard material, and I want to compare, you know, the deck versus Tron, Amulet, Scapeshift, Storm, decks that are proactive, and cards that are just decks that are just linear. And we need to kill them before they execute whatever they want to do, before they, you know, assemble Tron, before they cast Scapeshift, before they, you know, cast a Titan, where they don't have much interaction. They're just doing their own thing, and we need to get under them. And in Abzan, where we have, you know, Tarmogoyf's great, right? The ideal start is we go discard into Tarmogoyf. So we interact with them, take them off, you know, assembling whatever pieces they need, whether it's, you know, a ramp effect or, you know, assembling Tron, for example. Tarmogoyf is the best because it's the quickest clock. This card is a quicker clock than Tarmogoyf because you go turn 1 discard spell, turn 2 Stoneforge Mystic, turn 3 flash this in, and attack for 5. This thing has haste and trample. So against stuff like Amulet Titan where they have Colony Garden and they just make a plant and they just chump block you while they just like hope to draw a Titan. Like this says trample is insane, and haste and indestructible. Like this has a lot of text, and it turns your Stoneforge Mystics into more Tarmogoyfs, right? So you have like when you're against Amulet Titan, Stoneforge Mystic is nice to kind of top deck mid to late game if you're trying to just punch through. So being able to fetch a Sword of Feast and Famine is nice, but it's not your turn 2 play where you want to just clock them. Against Tron, Stoneforge Mystic is probably the worst turn 2 play. I'd rather have like Dark Confidant than Stoneforge Mystic against Tron. This card changes that. Like now it's like, oh yeah, I'll take a Stoneforge Mystic. I'll clock my opponent for 5 on turn 3. I'll take that. So I'm really, really excited about this card because the key thing is it improves our bad matchups, right? And that's what you want from a new card. Like you don't really care about your good matchups, right? Because they're good. This improves your bad matchups. So again, this is the card that I'm most excited about because it turns, like, before it'd be, I really hope I have a Tarmogoyf because I really need a 2-drop that clocks our opponent. Now it's, oh, I have 4 Tarmogoyf and for Stoneforge Mystic. Now the likelihood of us having a quick clock on turn 2 is that much higher. And I just this is the card that I'm just so excited about. Like it's just like our matchups against Tron on top of Vindicate. Like this card, like our matchups against Bin Mana is just gonna be so improved. I'm like so excited. Set review being the 2 best colors. I will say that blue red is not playable. We're gonna talk about the only playable colors in Modern. So the next card is going to be kind of the card that's the most hyped. I feel like what's been said about this card has already been said. So to get into it for those who aren't really exposed to the spoiler season, it's 2 black. It's an elemental incarnation creature. It has menace. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. It has evoke, exile a black card from your hand. So it's literally in a mask. Oh, perfect. Ask Apollo 42 said in it. It's an unmask. And the more powerful thing about it is you can ephemerate it. So what you do is you evoke, cast Grief, comes into play. You stack the triggers, and you can actually let the discard trigger resolve first. And then once you let it resolve first, you can actually fight the removal spell with Ephemerate, which is actually crazy. So if you have like a bolt, right? And like every opponent has a bolt, and I go Grief and I Ephemerate, they bolt in response, and your Ephemerate just doesn't do anything. But you still get to, unmask them. The thing is, like, you can protect your Grief you can protect your Ephemerate if you think about it that way. Which is crazy. This card is so good in combination with Ephemerate. And that's the thing. How good is this without Ephemerate? And I think this is one of those high ceiling, low flow cards where, like, the more when I initially thought about, like, read this card and I was like thinking about it, I'm like, this card's busted. Like, Abzan finally has something where we can do something busted on turn 1, where we go a Grief Ephemerate, and then we have, a 3/2 with Menace. Again, don't forget the Menace. So, like, even if your opponent goes, like, Arboreal Grazer, something where you want to block, it's like, it has Menace, so you're just clocking them. Outside of that situation, I think this is, like, a very high ceiling, low floor card, where the floor is really low, where if you don't have a black card in your hand, or you top deck it, there's situations where you don't have 4 mana where you cast this as a threat. You draw this, and you're just like, you don't want to exile a black card. If you have like a Fatal Push and a Grief, you don't want to exile your Fatal Push against, a creature deck just to cast your threat. There's these situations that are very, very awkward. So, like, the ceiling is so high where you can double unmask your opponent, but, like, outside of that, like, 10%, like, 80% down, like, this card is awful. Like, you're exiling good cards in your hand if you're a mid-range deck. You can't afford exiling a Fatal Push. If you have a late discard spell, sure, you can exile that, but that means you just have a lot of dead cards in your hand, right? And it just makes things so awkward. So, am I scared of this card? Yes. I think, you're going to have games where you just lose to Grief plus Ephemerate, and your hand is just destroyed and you can't do anything. And then you just have a 3/2 that you can't block, right? Because you're not drawing enough creatures. But then, on the flip side, it's like, it's not great with a lot of other combinations of other cards. So I have my reservations on this. I don't think this will fit in BGX. I think it'll probably spark its own archetype. As Capello said in the chat, it's good in combo decks with that Ephemerate, and I think so too. Just being able to, like, protect your combo proactively and then, like, execute your game plan, it's probably better in those decks than it is in fair mid-range decks where you can't really 2-for-1 yourself. The thing is, like, with Ephemerate, you actually net even. You take 2 cards and you have a 3/2. So, like, you net even on cards. Your hand and your opponent's hand's probably stuck with nothing. But outside of that dream scenario, it's pretty bad. So I do have my reservations on this. I don't think it's as good as people think it is. I do think it is as good as people think it is. So I think it's both. I think it's one of those, again, high ceiling, low floor plays where it's good and is also bad. Like, it's not always going to be good. How's it going, Nathan? Realize? Hope you're doing well. So the next card is Dauthi Voidwalker, and this card is insane. It's black creature Dauthi Rogue as Shadow. So I know a lot of people who are probably new to the game don't know what Shadow does. Is this creature can block or be blocked by only creatures with Shadow. So essentially, unless you see another Voidwalker across the board, it's pretty much unblockable and can't block. And if a card would be put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead with a Void counter on it. So it's pretty much a Leyline of the Void, which is crazy. And then when you sacrifice it, choose an exile card an opponent owns with a Void counter on it, and you may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. This card is insane. First off, it's a 2-mana 3/2 unblockable, right? So in a deck with like equipment, like this card's insane. Like this makes Sword of Fire and Ice so good. Okay. Second, if you go like Voidwalker and then you cast a discard spell, you take something, right? And then let's say, you know, they untap and they kill it. You get to cast another Voidwalker, and then if you get to untap with that Voidwalker, you get to cast something your opponent. Like whatever, like these Void counters isn't exclusive to you know, the specific Voidwalker that saw the card go into exile. Like the Voidwalker that exiled something that had a Void counter, your fourth Voidwalker can cast it. Again, you have to tap this to cast the card, so that's the downside of the ability. But the fact that it's pretty much unblockable and it's a Leyline of the Void on a stick is insane. So you can, you know, cast a, you know, it stops Lava Dart. It starts Seasoned Pyromancer from getting tokens. It stops Kroxa. You don't have to talk about Dredge. So this card is just insane. And it's recurable with Luris. So like you can like bring it back, you know, kill your opponent's thing, untap, attack with it, sack it, play the card, bring it back with Luris, and repeat it. It's a little slow. With that being said, I think in combination with equipment, this card is great because of Shadow. Like, people like kind of talk about Grimflare and how awesome Grimflare is, and how it's great with equipment. I think this will have that same kind of vibe where it's only good when it's attacking, because you know it's I guess I can't say that. It's not only good when it's attacking, but like Grimflare is only good when it's attacking, right? This card kind of has that same kind of drawback where it can only attack, like it's not gonna do anything to block on defense. But it has this like really crazy ability where it does something that Grimflare doesn't have access to. So I'm kind of on the fence on this card. I don't know how good this card is. But I'm gonna try 4. I'm gonna jam it, and I'm gonna have Luris obviously, and the prospects of going like Voidwalker, Thoughtseize my opponent, take their Karn, attack for 3 the following turn, cast the Karn, and then exile their Tron land, and like that ceiling is there. Dauthi doesn't even say, yeah, it's the only thing is like that ability to cast your opponent's card is slow. You have to untap with it. But if you do get to untap with it, it's like a Bob, right? If you get to untap with Bob, you're like in such great shape. This is kind of the same thing. So I'm excited. And the fact that it's a 3-mana 3/2 too, so it's like a decent clock. Does this replace Scholar in a 2-drop slot? Unblockable. It could. I don't think it would replace Scholar. I think you run it in conjunction with Scholar. You do have like Nombos because the card that you exile with Scholar you can't cast with Voidwalker. But I don't think you can cut Scholar. I think you want both of those effects. Just because, you know, you still run discard spells, you still run Fatal Push, you're going to run Vindicate and Orzhov, right? So you want to Vindicate something and then like get it with Voidwalker. The problem is like this is kind of a bad top deck. So like, you know, you slam this Voidwalker and it doesn't really do anything. You kind of need this card needs help, right? So I think this is one of those cards where you need 4. So that way you can start getting void counters on things early. And we can go from there. I don't even hate Raven's Crime. Yeah. Even something like Raven's Crime, where you can just like recur. Not enough space in my 6 telling me it's Yorion time? Yes. There's so many good cards. I mentioned earlier, Shane Gabriel asked, it's Yorion time. So this, I know I said Kaldra is the card that I'm most excited about because it improves their matchups. This is the other card I am most excited about. Grist is insane. I think this is the card that I want to build my BGX deck around that doesn't change the deck fundamentally. Okay? So it's a 1 black-green legendary planeswalker. As long as Grist isn't on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 creature in addition to its other types. So let's stop there. This card can't get force negation. It can't get stubbed. You can Coco it in, you can Aether Valid in, you can unearth it. Okay? Insane. Insane. So the fact that you can play this, kill a Death Shadow through a Stubborn Denial is insane. Right? And like your opponent taps out, for a Jace, you try to trophy it and they force a negation it, feels really bad. So the fact that this is actually a creature is so good. So let's go into the abilities. It's +1, create a 1/1 black-green insect token, then mill a card. If an insect was milled this way, put up loyalty on Grist and repeat this process. So it's a cool +1 effect. It's essentially Bitter Blossom. How's it going, Arcantos? Hope you're doing well. And again, I'm coming from an Abzan perspective where this card's great with equipment. Like, it's constantly churning out 1/1s. It's the card that Bitter Blossom wants to be. It's just, granted, it's 1 mana more, but it's literally Bitter Blossom. And it feels the second ability where it's -2. You may sacrifice a creature when you do destroy target creature or planeswalker. So this card, that ability is just so powerful because it's repeatable. You can go -kill something, +1, -kill something. This card is so good. So good. I'm 100% building around this card. So think about it this way. Like, you're going to have, Noble Hierarch or Ignoble Hierarch in your deck because you want to turn to Vindicate a land, right? So you're already going to have these dorks. And then you're going to have a Stoneforge Mystic. You can flash in a Batterskull. You can Grist, sack the Stoneforge Mystic, kill something. Like, we have a lot of kind of creatures that are expendable. Lingering Souls, so you can go like turn 1 Hierarch, turn 2 Lingering Souls, turn 3 Grist, sack a creature, destroy something, protect the Grist with the Lingering Souls, plus make a 1/1. It's like and then like with the Hierarchs, like you can send 1 spirit on offense and deal the same damage and leave 1 spirit back to block. Like, there's all these like these subtle synergies with like these Mana Dorks, Lingering Souls, and Grist, like, and Vindicate. Like, it's kind of building the deck all on its own. And I haven't got to the ultimate yet. The ultimate is each opponent loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. And this is the thing. Abzan has no reach. We don't have Bolt. This card gives us reach. Yeah, alright, I'm gonna mill my, I have a Stoneforge Mystic in my graveyard. I have some Dorks in graveyard that I chumped with. I have 5 creatures in graveyard, and there's a lot of games where your opponent's at 5 and you can't close the door. You have an ultimate that kills them. Like, it's kind of like Kaya, Orzhov Usurper, where its ultimate deals damage equal to the number of cards in your opponent's exile zone. Same thing. That Kaya ultimate is just so good because it gives us that reach and just does the same thing. So this card literally does everything I want to do. It kills something, it generates value, and it closes the door. It does so much, and it doesn't get forced or stubbed. This card is just so good. I'm very excited because even then, like, if you go like turn 1 Hierarch, turn 2 Grist, you can stack the Hierarch, kill something. So like, if they go turn 1 Ragavan, right? If I go turn 1 Hierarch, they go turn 1 drop like Swiftspear or Ragavan or whatever. I could go turn 2 Grist, kill my sacrifice my heart, kill the thing. I have a Planeswalker on board, and you know how crazy it is when you untap with a Planeswalker on an empty board, right? That's really, really good. So I'm really excited. This card seems insane. The more I thought about it, I thought this, like, I know people are like hyped about Grief. Like, Grief's so good. Grief's gonna be playing Wars off, this and that, Abzan, blah, BGX. This is the card I'm most excited about. This card is just insane. So excited. So excited. Next, we're actually going to talk about a card that I'm not really excited about. I know a lot of people are going to be asking about this. This is Tourach, Dread Cantor, 1 black, legendary creature. It has kicker with black, pro white. Whenever opponent discards a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Tourach. When Tourach enters the battlefield, if it is kicked, the target opponent discards 2 cards at random. So this is a card that was supposed to be into Tourach, and I guess it wasn't, which is kind of unfortunate. But it's a 2-mana 2/1. For 2 mana with pro white. I don't think this card's good enough because you have to spend 4 mana to really get any value out of it. Maybe it depends on how good white is in the meta, and then you just play this as a 2 mana 2/1, but that's pretty poor. I feel like by the time you get to turn 4, you're hoping your opponent doesn't have any cards anyway in hand, you know. So I think this card is pretty mediocre. Even if you cast this on turn 3, if you ramp into it, I think it's still quite slow. I know it gets pumped if you have like Lilianas and Croxas, etc. But this card needs a lot of help that I'm like the ceiling on this card is kind of whatever, while the ceiling on like Voidwalker is so high. So that's kind of why I'm like comparing the two essentially, and this card is just not there in my opinion. And then we're going to back it up with another card that I think is kind of not there either. Sword of Hearth and Home. I rate every sword by its protection. That's the thing. How good are the protection colors? If there's a lot of green, white, maybe you can consider this. But even when you connect it with the creature that's equipped to, it's kind of loose because it's... I should probably say what the card is. It's 3 mana. It's an artifact equipment. A creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from green and white. And whenever a creature deals combat damage, player exile up to 1 target creature you own, then search your library for a basic land, and you put both on your battlefield under your control. So at least the land you search for comes play untapped. But like, I'd rather just play 4 Sword of Feast of Famine and just get double my mana. You know, like, you know what I mean? And it already has a protection for green, right? And the fact that like the blink effect is cute, but like if you go Stoneforge Mystic, fetch this, and then equip the Stoneforge Mystic in case it's your only threat, and then you deal and then you know, connect, you have to flicker a Stoneforge Mystic and then it gets unequipped. Like, it's just kind of awkward and very underwhelming, and especially when the ramp effect is kind of whatever. I mean, people are like, I don't think it would even be great in like, you know, the green white like Reclaimer, you know, like there's nothing you really want to flicker. Like, this card really just is very underwhelming, and I'd rather just have, you know, Feast and Famine or Light and Shadow, you know, if you really want to protect from green and or white. So next is Ignoble Hierarch. I'm really mad because Jund got a Hierarch before Abzan did, even though Abzan is the Noble Hierarch deck. So I'm very kind of annoyed about this card. All I'm going to say is you're probably going to play... If you're going to play Noble Hierarch, you're probably going to play this in combination, or you just have more options, right? I think... I mean, all I'm going to say is, at least for Jund, I'm going to be pretty happy because it's probably going to spawn multiple types of Jund, which is cool. Having multiple sub-archetypes in an archetype is great. Like, if you think about it this way, like having Jund, Abzan, and Rock is cool, right? Just having different flavors of different archetype is great. And even with the sub-archetype of Jund, you can have, you know, a Bloodbraid, just a boomer Bloodbraid Jund. You're going to have Hierarch Jund, where, you know, it's more low to the ground. You want to double spell quicker. You know, it's more efficient. You're going to have, like, Death Shadow Jund. So, like, these having, like, this card by itself, 1-mana dork, is going to spawn... Oh, more sub-archetypes is just so good. So I'm really excited about this card. From a holistic point of view, spawning more decks. Next is Endurance. This is a card where I don't think we have enough green cards. I just want to say how broken this card is because it's 3 mana, 3/4 flash reach, which is crazy. So when it comes into play, it's one of those cards in the Vogue cycles. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to one target player puts all cards from the bottom of their graveyard and the bottom of their library in random order. I think that's just another nice tool to have. If you're more green heavy in your rock or Abzan deck, or green white deck, like I think this card's going to be very powerful to protect yourself against mill, protect yourself against dredge. I think this is the card that's just again nice to have. But probably just doesn't fit in Abzan because again we don't have enough green cards. Our only green cards are like Tarmogoyf from Abrupt Decay. That's pretty much it. So again, nice to have. Probably more. There's like stuff like Green Red Hilliard will probably play this before us just to protect themselves from mill and dredge, right? Next, we're gonna go into. We only have 4 cards left that I want to talk about, and we're going into the hate cards of the set. So the first off, it's Sanctifier en-Vec. It's white, protection from black and red. It's a human cleric creature. When it enters the battlefield, exile all cards that are black and red from all graveyards. And if a black or red permanent spell or card not on the battlefield, we put in the graveyard, exile instead. So it's like a Leyline of the Void for black and red spells, and a Rest in Peace. So essentially a Rest in Peace. Sorry, that's a better description. It's a better Rest in Peace for specifically black and red cards. So this card is absurd. Against dredge, against like lava dart, so that you can block the red spells. Against Cruxa, against Shadow, like this card is pretty cool. I don't know how well it'll fit in Abzan specifically because we don't even run stuff like Auriok Champion. But the fact that it has like an ETB effect to exile, black and red cards that don't really affect us. It doesn't exile our Lingering Souls. It doesn't affect our Mishra's Baubles, Stoneforge Mystics, Tarmogoyfs to recur with Luris. It does exile Liliana of the Veil, if that counts. So it does exile stuff for Tarmogoyf reasons. But other than that, like this card seems very, very powerful and something to consider. If we were to consider Auric Champion, that's another card to consider because it has that added yard hate. So this card is subtly very, very versatile. So again, nice to have in our toolbox. I don't know if it'll be immediately slotted in, but I think it's going to be very nice to have. Next is Cursed Totem. It's a 2-mana artifact. Activated abilities of creatures can't be activated. Again, nice to have Cyborg Hate. I know Green Red Hilliard is, still tier 1. We're struggling. It's a very bad matchup for us. But this card stops Spike Feeder, Arbor Elf, Walking Ballista, Hilliard, Ranger Captain, I guess, if you want to count that. But I don't think it's a really relevant activated ability. But it's 2 mana that it would probably never get discarded or destroyed because they have Skyclave Apparition. But on that note, it does get recurred by Luris if need be. Again, this card is a cool card to have. A nice piece of Cyber Hate that's cheap, efficient, versatile, and doesn't really impact us. It technically impacts Stoneforge Mystic, but it doesn't stop the equipment. Doesn't stop our baubles. It does stop Scavenging Ooze if you're in the market of Scavenging Ooze still. But it probably hurts our opponent a lot more than it hurts us. So again, this is a nice to have card in our toolbox. Next is Break the Ice, and I laughed when this card got spoiled. It's a black sorcery to restore target land that is snow or could produce colorless. And as Overload for black, you may cast a spell for its Overload cost, and then you pretty much destroy every land that produces colorless. This card is really, really funny because it's just like the whole set screams Tron hate. So it's actually just hilarious that we have a sinkhole for Tron. So I'm excited for this because if Tron ends up being super tier 1, takes over, the Mono meta, and if you're like me and I keep getting paired against Tron, you can play this. You can interact with Tron turn 2. So again, pretty excited about this. I think it won't see play unless Tron is that apparent. Or if like there's like a big mana snow deck. Again, it's our toolbox that will probably never play, but it's nice to have to at least have some fear into into Tron. It's just funny because we already have Vindicate already, so like this card is not unnecessary, but Vindicate kind of needs a mana dork to cast Vindicate on turn 2. So it's like Armac, this is in the same set. But again, nice to have. The last card we're going to talk about is Voidmere. Talk about Tron Hate. It's 2 mana artifact. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no color mana was spent to cast it, counter it. So if you're against Eldrazi Tron that has no colored mana, they can't cast anything. Like, it's so good. This card is crazy. This card's better against E-Tron than Tron, because regular Tron has like the chromatic spheres and chromatic stars, so they can like filter the colorless mana into green or whatever, and then cast a Karn, right? The thing is if they don't have any stars or spears in play, or they don't have a basic forest, they can't cast anything. They need to like naturally draw a forest. So this card is potentially very, very good at just spawning Tron. Like, Tron can't do anything. Especially E-Tron, where they don't have basic forest or anything, right? So that's a card that I'm very, very excited about. So that's what I'm very, very excited about. Again, we're just getting all this Tron hate in the set that I'm very, very, very excited about. Did we talk about Prismatic Ending? We did. We talked about Prismatic Ending already. It's a card that I'm, again, very, very excited about. You can just... I don't want to take up too much of the video. We're already at 50 minutes. You can just go back to my YouTube link. But TLDR, I think it's a card that it's nice to have access to, and I think as the format gets lower and lower to the ground, this card gets better, because the more 1-drops that you have in the format, the better rate this card is compared to something like Abrupt Decay. But in a deck like Orzhov, this card is a slam dunk because you don't have access to a card like an Abrupt Decay. And just hope that you don't have too many 3-drops. Again, if the less 3-drops in the meta, the better this card gets, right? The more lower to the ground the format gets, the better this card gets. So the last segment of the video, I know I wanted this to be half our video. It ended up being an hour, and my girlfriend came in and she was wondering what we're doing because she's waiting for me for dinner. The last thing I want to talk about is what I'm going to try once I have access to Modern Horizons. And this is where I'm at, except for the fact that apparently a card got removed from my sideboard. I don't know what it is. Let me just make an extra Plague Man. Something must have changed when I was like messing with the stream. But I know everyone's like, how do I find all these good cards? How do I find all these good cards? Yorion. I've been a huge advocate of Yorion and Abzan for like the past like 2 months. Just having access to that 8th card is broken. And there's a lot of good cards in Modern Horizons, but nothing is more broken than an 8th card in the sideboard that we can an 8th card in hand, right? So again, Yorion is just, I'm going to stick with the Yorion build, A, because it's broken, B, because I want to fit every card I want to try. I do have a non-Yorion build that I'm going to show after, but this is kind of where I'm starting off with. I have, 7 discard spells, which was had in my previous version. I have, the standard push, decay, Stoneforge Mystic package, Luris, Bauble. So the notable additions, as you can see, I don't have are all from Modern Horizons. We have the Ignoble Hierarch. So I have a 4/2 split. I want more black because of Dauthi Voidwalker is double black here. So if I don't have this, and I might, if this card ends up being a flop, and I can imagine having like a Hierarch split to have like Skyclave Apparition, which is a notable omission from this list. For Dauthi Voidwalker, so we have more 2-drops, so we have a kind of pretty decent curve. And then of course we have 3 Grist to build around the rest of the deck. We have 3 Lingering Souls for the Grist and the equipment. We have 3 Luris to bring back the Voidwalkers. Worst case scenario, we can have infinite chump blockers with Hierarchs. A nice with Mishra's Bauble, which go great with Tarmogoyf. And then we have 3 Vindicate here. So hopefully we can turn 2 pillage our opponents pretty frequently with 6 mana dorks in an 80 card deck. And in the sideboard, the notable additions are the Void Mirror, like I said, and the Kaldra Compleat. Again, the card that I'm kind of omitting is Damn, and another card that I do kind of want to try is Unearth. So those are 2 cards that I'm missing. There's just not enough room for removal spells. If this card ends up being not great, I can see cutting these for, a Cling, maybe adding a Kaya's Guile here. Someone may be cutting a Lingering Souls for a Kaya's Guile because there's no stone Scavenging Ooze for Yard Hate. And then from there, I probably might add an Earth or and a Dam. And I probably have to add some Scavenging Ooze if this card ends up being a flop. But yeah, this is probably where we're gonna start. This is probably conclude the video here. I'm not sure when my next stream will be, because it'll 100% depend on the availability of these cards. I might have to just get a Mana Traders account just to be able to stream this. And before I forget, here is the non-Yorion version. As you can see, like, there's a lot of cards that I want to fit in, but like I'm like running 3 Luris, but then I have 3 Hierarch, and then I have 2 Grist, 1 Vindicate, 3 Voidwalker. Like, it doesn't I feel like the consistency is just not that great. And ironically, in a 60 card build, I want to be able to have access to more Vindicate. And I only have room for 1. Versus in this build, 80 card build, we have plenty of room for 3 Vindicate, 3 Living Souls, and 3 Luris. So again, I know a lot of people are like, is there a non-Yorion version? Is there a non-Yorion version? And this is the non-Yorion version, and I don't like it on paper. It might be easier to squeeze cards in if I can cut these Voidwalkers, but like we need these Hierarchs to like cast these turn 2 Vindicate, and even then it's like there's only 1. I also want to point out the notable omission is Liliana of the Veil. I think I have to cut the Lilianas in order to make room for the Grist. And hopefully, the thing about it is like I kind of want Lilianas with Voidwalkers, right? So that is kind of a notable omission. So I will think about that as I'm playing this deck, where how much am I going to be missing Liliana? We're pretty much relying on, the 7 discard spells to exile something with Voidwalker. Maybe I need to just, maybe Voidwalker and Grist shouldn't be in the same deck. But I just want to try both. So this is definitely probably the least optimal build. But I think this is a good starting point to try everything. Try the Voidwalkers, try the Grist, try the turn 2 Vindicate, have the Hierarchs with equipment, have the Hierarchs with Grist. So maybe this isn't a good Voidwalker deck. Maybe this, again, should probably just be Dam, Unearth, Scavenging Ooze. Because we have these Mana Dorks, right? We can have Scavenging Ooze and activate on turn 2. So maybe this is just a better Scavenging Ooze deck. Maybe that makes room for a Skyclave Apparition because of the Yorion. So yeah, we appreciate everyone for tuning in. I know this is a lot of babbling. But I really wanted to get some content out there about Modern Horizons because I really can't play Modern Horizons right now because of the lack of the cards. So yeah, really appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you guys like this video, please support the channel by subscribing from YouTube and hitting the like button. And if there's any suggestions, any other cards that I missed that you want to see, or any other kind of optimizations to the list that you want to see here, or another deck you want me to play, since I am going to get the Mana Traders, post it in the comment section. Other than that, really appreciate you for tuning in and hanging out. Since I actually have some viewers, I actually wasn't expecting any viewers since I'm just like babbling. Let's send you all over a raid. Just a little small mini raid, but send some love here. Let's raid Genderdome. Looks like he's against Tron, which is unfortunate. Really appreciate you for tuning in and hanging out. Take it easy. Stay safe, stay healthy. Follow me on Discord, or join my Discord and follow me on Twitter for the stream updates, because again, I'm not sure exactly when I will be able to go live. But yeah, take it easy, stay safe, stay healthy. Hopefully Modern Horizons treated us fair players well. I'm gonna wait for this ad to finish so I can go in and say hi to Marty. But yeah, send some love to Marty, playing some Jund, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.